before. That always feels good as an old, well, I shouldn't say old, excuse me, as a retired school administrator, that always feels good. And we want to again welcome you. My name is Rosalinda Cardenas. All those letters just kind of signify that I like school a lot, just like you guys back in the day, right? And my background is starting from a kindergarten school teacher and moving on to all the possible different things you could do at a school site and being an administrator. And my big love at schools was special education. And before that, it was bilingual education, and it's always kind of wrapped around. It's come down to my philosophy of serving the underserved. So the most underserved nowadays, it seems, is our population that is dealing with mental health issues. I saw that in the 38 years that I was in the schools, and it was a bit of a frustration when we just couldn't get enough resources available and that were really accessible to the families and in order to help our kids that were really suffering across the board. And it wasn't just relegated to students with special needs on an IEP or a 504. These are students, some of your best, top-notch students, I would say, wouldn't say best, but some of your high-achieving students are actually, as probably you were suffering with, not that you were suffering with anxiety, but we saw them suffering with anxiety, and we saw them also dealing with a lot of trauma and using school as a place where really they could shine, but a lot of things were going on under, these still waters, that sea. So across the board, it was something that I was always coming home with and sharing with my one and only for the past 37 years, maybe 38 years in January, Dr. Cardenas. And we both grew up in this environment, this beautiful community. Our parents are both immigrants, and they came to San Fernando, and they built their families. And we kind of grew up together in terms of families and the community. But of course, here you find us in coming together. And really coming together with not just a beautiful family that you'll meet, that was Christian, our youngest, working towards his doctorate at RAM, and we're very proud of him in policy. And of course, Ben, who you know, who went away to San Antonio and got this big idea that he wasn't going to come back and work for corporate. No, he was going to open up and create a nonprofit, and the nonprofit would be dedicated to training these wonderful people who he knew could duplicate these wonderful individuals that he was around growing up. So we're all a big family, and he, of course, married our beautiful Dr. Lucerito, and I'm very proud. She is our daughter-in-law, and we have another son who's not here. He's in Mammoth with our grandkids and my beautiful daughter-in-law. That's the family, and we have Elizabeth back here. I don't know if you'll see her. She's also part of the board, and she's a counselor at Whittier, and she focuses on getting a lot of kiddos in that are excited about going into the medical field as doctors and who knows what else and graduate. So my point of all this, and Elizabeth is the newest member of our family in that we've embraced her as Christian's girlfriend. So we're excited to be a team and continue moving forward. Jessica is my niece. And if you guys don't know Jessie, you will know Jess. I call her Jessie, you will call her Jessica. And Jessica is amazing at so many wonderful things, and you'll be hearing from her in a bit. She is the eldest of all of the grandchildren on my side, the Rivera side. She's my sister, my beloved sister, Carmen, from Moorpark's oldest daughter. There's so many more people I wanted to introduce, but the reason I start this off is that we're a family. And in order to be a family and to go into schools with this idea, you have to just be realistic, that you're working with a big system. And we're actually very proud to say that we all share this one idea that school mental health support and services must be a critical component of any educational system, on par with high-quality academic instruction. That is so important because of the fact that we know that we want our kids to succeed, we want them to go out and to do so much more But if there are underlying factors that aren't being addressed, these things, as you know, earlier addressed, the more likelihood of being able to move forward. So as we move on, we know that, I'm sorry, go back one slide, where this is all from the National Association of School Psychologists. You guys are probably very familiar with this information. If not, there's a lot on those websites. And of course, we have the National Center for School Mental Health. So that's where Jose and I come together. See that little schoolhouse? That's me. See that sign right there with the psychologist? That's Dr. C. And you all, our family, our Numenarias family, and our families of over 18 schools are also part of this great venture. So as we move on, we're moving on with good stead, knowing that we're doing the right thing, because we know that currently mental health services in schools, approximately 75 to 80% of the children and youth needing mental health services do not receive that. Think about that. And you all are going to make a difference. Why? Because we're so dedicated to making the difference. We know that of those who do receive assistance, the vast majority, 70 to 80%, receive mental health services. Where? Where? In the schools. That's right. And raise your hand if that's where you're going to be very soon. If not already. That's exactly where you guys are, right? And for those that have already experienced it, you know you're making a difference. Okay? And they still need us, even more so. So that's why we're dedicated to training and being able to go into our schools and to be able to share and to, but how do you do that, right? Because we're the community and we're going into this school. Well, you know, we all have to play nice. We all have rules to follow, right? And we all want to, as we move on, my whole focus is how you are going to be engaging yourself in this new environment. If it's new, you got a lot of fun times ahead of you. If it's not so new because you've been there, because you yourself have already been staff at a school site, you have some background. Let us move forward and I'll talk a little bit about what we work with. Benefits, before we do that, let's talk about the benefits of a comprehensive school mental health services. We know that the access to school mental health services improve. You guys read them with me. Physical and psychological safety, academic performance, and the next slide, it continues, and it also access to school mental health services reduces negative outcomes such as disciplinary referrals, dropouts, substance abuse, involvement in the criminal justice system. Okay, moving on. Okay. You all are going to be our ambassadors. You all are the face of Numenarias. You all are the ones that say, you know what, you're not alone, teacher, in the classroom, assistant principal, with a line out the door of discipline problems, referrals. You are not alone, front office, school community outreach, parent liaisons at schools, principals with instruction. We're here to support you. Give us a space, please give us a space, so that we can do what we want to do and work with you. So what do we have to always remember? Staying in our lane, okay? Always be respectful of the fact that we are guests on their campus. We are there because they are inviting us to be there, okay? School, but we know that we aren't the one and only saviors, right, coming in with mental health. Look at all these wonderful people. We have school-employed mental health professionals who are specially trained to provide services in the learning context. Let's read them. School counselors. Come on, guys, you gotta get to know them. School counselors, school psychologists, school social workers. That's enough. Provide the vast majority of the school-based services. Okay, raise your hand if you have ever met or you hope to be one, or perhaps you know that these people have made a difference for you or some or a loved one. School counselor, school psychologist, and school social workers. Absolutely, yes. Okay, so now we know that they are specially trained in school system functioning and learning, as well as how students' behavior and mental health impacts their ability to be successful in schools. How do we get our referrals? by these wonderful people who are doing student success teams that are looking and monitoring the students, and they could call them all different names at the schools in terms of the teams that are working to support, but we get the referrals from these amazing individuals. So, you know, kudos to them. Okay, so let us not step on their toes as we move on. There's a multi-tiered system of support. How many of you have seen this before? Ah, beautiful. Yes, this is how we kind of organize schools. And as an administrator in charge of climate and culture at over 38 schools, over 35 schools, and I don't know how many years of being everything under the sun, this is very prominent. This is what we do. We promote where there's a promotion of positive social, emotional behavior skills and overall wellness for all students. 100%. We teach this. Be safe. Who knows the other one? Be safe. I got it. Who said it? Don't be shy. Be responsible and be respectful. Those are the 3 B's. And it's been around for years and years and years. And that is what everybody talks about in schools and how that looks in different settings in the school side. When our kids aren't quite getting there and we need some more support, we move on to tier 2, and not all of the kids need this, but plus this, we want to give supports at early intervention for students identified through needs assessments as being at risk for mental health concerns. These needs assessments vary from different school sites to school sites. This is pretty much, and I'll go on to the next one, and share where we fit in. And you guys can think about, well, where do we fit in? Okay, tier 3, plus targeted interventions for students with serious concerns that impact daily functioning. Okay, move on. Okay, the tier, this was adapted from the communication planning and message development promoting school-based mental health services. It's it's coming out of the National Association of School Psychologists in 2006. This is a very beautiful way of kind of looking at what the tiers are broken down into. All school employed mental health professionals, those lists that we were reading earlier, they're doing all of this here. Early identification of students with mental health behaviors, behavioral concerns, and school-based prevention. All students are here. As we move up, most school-employed mental health professionals are doing this, and they say most. So when they say most, who's coming into the picture, I wonder? Targeted school intervention. And then up here's some school-employed mental health professionals. Some. Who's filling in that gap? Let's move on. School-employed mental health professionals in community. Hello. Community mental health partners support students across a multi-tiered system of support. Who are we? We are the who? Community mental health partners. So if somebody comes and says, hi, I'm sorry, what's your name? Kobe, who are you? What are you going to say? I'm from? And Luminarias, what are you doing here? How do you help the school? Oh, I'm a community health partners support, and I support the students. And I support the students here, okay? You have to know what your role is. Thank you so much, Kobe. Thank you. You have to know what your role is to stay in the lane. If you don't know what your role is, you're not going to stay in the lane, and pretty soon you're not going to know. It's going to be frustrating. We don't want that for you, okay? That is my job, to help you navigate and to help the schools navigate so that we can make sure, because the bottom line, as you move on to the next, is we want to get to the kids and we want to help the kids. And how do we do that? Well, the focus of energy for us as community partners versus our friends at the school site are a little opposite. We're all upside down, but we're all coming together in the middle tier here. Okay? Here we not so much. We're not going out and teaching the 3 B's. That's not where you're getting your hours, to go in and teach the 3 B's in the classroom. Although that may be something you need to know about the school rules so that you can understand where they might be having some issues, okay? So it's good to know the culture of the school and what the expectations are, okay? So when you get there, find out. It's on the website. Selective services and supports, you'll find out that some of them have already been in social emotional groups perhaps, or they're being pulled out for counseling or DIS counseling or whatever it is. You find out you don't know what those busy doing other stuff, right? So don't blame them if they don't realize that they don't get back to you. I just know as an administrator, you've got 1,000 things to do and in one day, and you have to prioritize. Again, come to me. When you don't get the answers, please come to me. Okay, you have my emails inside of that folder. I make sure our card's in there, and that's my personal number. That's not even my Google number. Okay, moving on. I gotta update those cards, by the way. Anyway, key elements and action steps to support effective school community mental health partnerships. What can we do? What do the studies tell us, and what have we learned? Okay, as we go into the schools. Number one, appropriate staffing of school-based and community mental health professionals is paramount. We need to have an appropriate balance. And guess what? There just isn't. I'm going to tell you that right now. So let's all take off our rose-colored glasses and pretend that it's perfect. It is not. We are going into get ready to get messy. Roll up your sleeves. But it's worth it. Okay? Vale la pena. Vale la pena. Okay? It is worth every inch of our sufrimiento, our energies, right? It's going to be ugly before it gets pretty. Okay, it's going to get ugly before it gets pretty. Okay, so that's what I've always said in my school sites. So, and it has. There's progression. We're making a difference. We just have to be flexible. Think about how ready you are to go into these situations. School and community collaboration is critical, paramount, providing the full continuum of mental health services that we saw in those years. Okay, it's really important. Easier said than done, Mrs. Cardenas. Okay, number two, what helps us? What helps us is the fact that we have roles and responsibilities delineated for the school and community and those employed professionals. We stay in our lane and they stay in theirs. Okay? That is why we have what's called an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding. And if you talk to Ben, he's up to here with memorandums of understanding because every year we have to update it. And we have now yesterday we got someone who was just, please let us have your service. You didn't do it. We've been asking you to complete this information so we can do a memo. It takes time. It's a legal document. It may not be a contract, but there's a lot of legalities in there that we're kind of being respectful for one another because on their end, they have, they have the rights, the educational rights that need to be respected. And on this side, of course, we have HIPAA that needs to be respected. Those are like two big things, and other areas that need to be respected. But yet we have to share information, we need to have access in order to make a difference. So we're doing a partnership. So the Memorandum of Understanding really lays out things. If you ever want to see one and you need some late night reading, I'm sure Ben would be happy to send you a copy of your sites. And we'll do it. Okay, number three, develop a communication plan between the school, families, and community. As community mental health partners, our challenge is to ensure effective communication on our sites with the teachers, families, and other relevant stakeholders. And in this case, our relevant stakeholders are so many. We are very, very, I'll say it, blessed. Because we have so many wonderful people that are behind Luminarias and that are really, and Ben will share some of that information in a second in terms of what it all takes to make sure that we're keeping our promises for all of the different supports that we get. So number one promise we want to keep to is definitely our families and to our teachers, our school communities, but more than anything, we want to keep the promises to our clients that we're having with students. So that's why we have what's called resources. So resources, I'm a resource, please come let me know what I can do for you at school sites. If we do reach out, we're doing back to school nights right now. In fact, right now we're set up outside and we're, Adrian and Omar, they are sharing our information, a Brighter Tomorrow beginning today. There's a QR code back here that we have for them at LII Michigan College, they can pick it up, and they can open it up. They want more information, they can self-refer, and they can actually do the consent and everything here, and it'll get sent to our intakes, which is our department head, which is Jessica. and of course, we have other resources. We would love to go into the classrooms. We've gone after school for those that have a shortened day and you're there on Tuesdays. Don't let that opportunity go by. Oh, they go home, time for me to go. No, you're there till 3. What are you gonna do? You have a captive audience. Who can we see? How can we psychoeducate? What can we do? All of your administrators, they're not gonna turn you away if they say, I was wondering if you have a group of mommy and me's that I can work with, or parents that I could do some psycho ed, or perhaps I want to do some family outreach, or you could bring them in. Just because the teachers that had some boring PD, sorry, I ran those things for years, required boring PEDs, doesn't mean that you cannot do what you need to do and continue working to the end of the day. Raise your hand if you said, I only have Tuesdays and Thursdays available for Luminagas. Raise your hands. Right now. Raise them high. Raise them high again. I know there's more of you. There's thousands of you. Put your hands down. I think everybody wanted Tuesdays and Thursdays. Guess what? The schools don't all have Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you didn't fit. Okay? Guess what? We did magic, and it happened. Thank you. That guy back there, Ben, and I were busting up. It was hilarious because we're like, okay, let's see if this can happen. So the reality is, thank you, Ben, for doing all the MOUs and being so timely with all of that. I'd like to introduce Benjamin Cardenas. I'm extremely proud of my son, and I'd like him to kind of just share the other resources we have. Okay, that was my part.
First of all, hello and welcome to all of you new faces, and welcome. It's good to see you again, all of my friends. So it's good to see you. So yeah, really briefly, yesterday we were laughing because we were so delirious. Trying to balance all these schedules at these different schools who also have varying schedules and criteria. So we were just kind of going a little mad yesterday, but we did it somehow. It made sense on paper, so we're like, we'll go. In terms of other resources that we have available to you, we do a lot of fundraising, and this year we actually got a grant, which actually helps us cover your on-site incentives, so thank you so much for those who are participating in that opportunity, as well as the tech scholarship, which is, and I know some of you have already taken advantage of it. You've already talked to me, had meetings with me, saying like, hey, I need a new laptop, or my laptop broke, it doesn't work anymore. What should I get? I'm more than happy to have a discussion with you, whether your group PC, your group Mac, Apple, whatever it may be, Linux, I'll help you. That's kind of my thing that I do on the side to relax from this job. I look at tech, which isn't very relaxing sometimes, but I love it. So if there's any questions that you have, please take advantage of that opportunity for you, especially if you're on site. I'd be more than happy to help you offset that cost by up to $1,000. And there's a lot of really great laptops that are actually under $1,000, so you can actually get everything you need and be ready for grad school, so long as you're not like gaming, even then there's some options, but so yeah. Thank you. And yeah, Dr. C actually told me the mic's too low, you can hear me, my phone. That was good, that was a good sign. Let's see, some other resources that we have available to you is something Dr. Lucidico is going to talk about, which is a brand new system that we invested in. We used some of the money from the grant. We used a lot of money from the grant to upgrade into this cloud-based system that keeps a lot of things much more HIPAA compliant, a lot more accessible, and it should make note writing a lot faster compared to what you used to do. Once it has more information, it's kind of like an AI system. The more you use it, the more it learns, and then the more it learns to fill in those gaps for you. It takes a significant data set, especially when it comes to us because we're a brand new organization. But in the next couple of weeks, or hopefully in the next month that we're using it really sincerely and aggressively, it should start working that way. And if it isn't, then I get to have an interesting phone call with people so it's me and then go from there. But yeah, I appreciate you doing that, and hopefully it's a helpful tool for you. We do try to reduce paperwork as much as possible, so you spend less time doing paperwork and more time collecting your direct clinical experience hours, which you can get signed up for BBS or whatever the appropriate board that kind of oversees all of your professional development work. What else is there? I think that's pretty much it. Of course, if there's any tech questions, something's not working, I'm usually the person that they forward your email to. You send it to your supervisor ultimately will send it to me. And then I do my best to set up a Zoom session or a phone, whatever you need, whatever's working, whatever's not. I also meet in person for some people. I know some of you live a little further away, so if you need to meet in person at the office, I'll make that happen. We'll just set up a time and I'll meet you there. I've done that a couple of times. I don't mind doing it some more. Especially, we really reward your effort here. We understand how much effort you're putting into it, and for us, we know you're not perfect. We know you don't know everything yet. Otherwise, why would you be in school? Why would you be in a practicum? But we do really just look for your effort, and we can tell if you're putting it in, and so far everybody has, and we really appreciate that. So we're really going to always kind of reflect that effort by going our extra mile if we need to help you. Because ultimately we want you to be amazing because we know you're capable of it. We know this population is very needy in terms of all the amazing help that we know they should get, but they're not. And they historically have not. So you're a huge step in the right direction for making that correction. So we really appreciate you. And if there's anything we can do to help you grow and become even better, or to fully actualize the amazingness that you are, please let us know. And of course, I'm going to pass it out to Dr. Lucifa to kind of explain this new TEPRA system. And because she's been the amazing person who's been training you and setting up all the forms and things like that. Those things are not automatic. She creates them from scratch. And she connects them and makes sure, and she does all the troubleshooting. So with that, giving it to the amazing Dr.
Hello. It's so good to see you all. I know that we've met already with onboarding, and so I know some of the faces, and I'm excited for this week, which is the workshops, or they're like training workshops to orient you all to TEPRA in a little bit of a more hands-on manner. I'm talking more about the incoming trainees, because some of you have already gone through this with me when we initially transitioned. I think that was back in May. And yeah, it's been a short while since we've been working with this new documentation system, but I think, you know, we're working out the kinks, some of the kinks still. And, you know, this upcoming week is going to give me an opportunity to see where some of you are, you know, in terms of, you know, proficiency, but really you won't have that hands-on experience until you have your first client, and then you schedule them and you have to write notes. So I just want to let you all know, even if, you know, incoming trainees or past trainees or LCI clinicians or supervisors, that whatever questions you might have, whether it's TEPRA, whether it's, you know, something else regarding troubleshooting or anything clinical, that I'm here for extra support. I'm a little bit of a liaison between the clinicians, the trainees, the supervisors, and admin, so I do a little bit of everything, depending on where it is that they need me. And I do it with a smile on, because I really enjoy what I do. And I know that we're all working towards the same goal, which is, you know, providing these mental health services to populations that really need it. And, you know, it's serving our community. And so, how wonderful is that? Are there any questions? Oh, okay. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Jessica. I just wanted to give a quick little intro. And if you have not signed up for a workshop and you're an incoming trainee starting in August, please reach out to me via email. I would have already emailed you a link to sign up for the workshop if you've completed already your TEPRA mental health provider training and your TEPRA telehealth training. The reason that we did it this way is so that it's not so overwhelming. So you do the trainings first with the modules, and then I send you the guide, the documentation guide for you to review before we meet, and we actually meet, and that's kind of hands-on, and we share. I have you share the screen, and I have you go through the different functions. So that's what we'll be doing next week, and I think a little bit into following. So feel free to email me if you've not received the link. All right, very good, Jessica.
Thank you, Dr. Lucito. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
That's good. Let's be a little. Let's try this one more time. I just need a little amp myself personally. Good morning. Good morning. All right, let's go with that. So inside of your folders are LII resources, books and such. I have my lovely friend, the What If Monster here. He comes in very handy. For those of you that have been with us for some time, you've already had the opportunity to grab some of the resource books. It is still available. To those of you that are coming into the program, what we offer here is a selection of social emotional based books and resources. You may go, well, why do I need this cute, adorable, fluffy little guy, right? Well, one of the clinicians shared with me that this was a great little starter for their group sessions. When in their groups, they were going around and whoever had the What If Monster was the one who got to share and go on from that. And you know, we don't just do a What If Monster, we have his matching book, and it's in English and Spanish. So these are a bunch of resources that are available to you all. These have been overlooked and recommended by Dr. Cardenas and the rest of the staff. They really hit on a bunch of different topics that have a selection of them in the back. What I want to share is, even though they may seem young, I mean, chronologically they say that they're for ages, 4 all the way up through middle school, sometimes 8, 9 plus. But let's be honest, we're dealing with students that are going through a lot of trauma. If they were their chronological age versus their emotional age, we wouldn't be hanging out with them, right? So we never want to make somebody feel like, oh, you're a little child or anything, but think about it this way. How many times, I know for me personally, growing up, mental health was not a huge thing on the table, right? I would tell them, my adult, my parents, I'm just not, I'm sad, I'm stressed. What do you have to be stressed about? You're a kid. What's the problem? Well, I guess there's nothing. You're right. I'll wait until many years later to address all those issues. And so needless to say, I found the books for myself, my own mental well-being, extremely helpful when it's a very crazy, chaotic, stressful day. It may seem silly, but doing one of these little colorings. I mean, how many of you remember the whole big craze for adult coloring going on, right? And it was, oh, it keeps you calm. Well, these books are along the same lines, but they also do target a lot of the topics that your students are dealing with. One of our great clinicians, Claudia, is not able to be here with us today, but like she said, you don't want to, they may not be the right resource right at the very beginning, but as they're working through their trauma, they may need a little magic painting. They may need a little something to help them open up about what is going on. And so what Luminarias does is they offer you the opportunity to pick and choose any of the resources at any time, no cost to you. That's what Luminarias is, one of the resources, is that whatever you choose, it will be delivered to the school, sent to your home, depending on if we have them in stock here on site, or if we need to order them. There was a few things, because I know some people were talking about icebreakers. The company, which is an educational company, it's been an educational publisher for the past 30 years. They came out with these new little art cards. Another great way, this one right here, draw an amazing story. So it has you pick, a card for who the character is, or where the setting is, or so forth. And it comes with, there's 4 different decks of them. Another great way to just kind of open up the conversation, to just, introduce, work on that building of a relationship that you as therapists with your students are doing. So please feel free to take a look at any of the resources, ask me any questions during the break. There's order forms inside of there. I'm happy to help you with anything. And like I said, it's Luminarias gift to you all. If you order it, they'll take care of it. Okay? Thank you all.
All right. So we're wrapping up on our resources, but I just want us to have a few takeaways here. What is that tagline? A brighter tomorrow starting today, right? And that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but really we're sending you out there, and we trust you, we interviewed you, we talked to you, we know your stories. We want you, when you're stepping foot on that campus, to share this message of a brighter tomorrow starting today, because you're there for a child. You're there to round out the resources at that school to make that setting a brighter setting for them today, right? Starting today. The sun doesn't shine any brighter tomorrow, and the sun did not shine any brighter yesterday. It's about who's there in their lives today. And so it started with this idea of a family being there for each other and being there for the community, and then filling the resources, and then finding you all, and then saying to you, each and every one of you, the same thing, brighter tomorrow, starting today for you and your careers. So how can we send you out there to say that to children and to kids who are vulnerable and going through a lot of trauma and going through all the things that you probably went through as well, to some extent, and more. And we can't say to you the same thing that you're going to say to them, because you're not alone. You have us as your resources. You have us behind you every step of the way. Reach out to Rosalina, reach out to Jesse, reach out to Lucido, and reach out to Ben, as much as you would, or whenever you need to, because yes, you'll have your supervisors who are evaluating and helping you and guiding you professionally, but there's so many other things that are rounding out this experience. It's not just the children don't need another professional in their life, they need a community. And we're bringing that community to them if they don't have it. And one unfortunate situation that we have to deal with children who don't have it. So that's why we need to be one, so we can be that for them. So next I'm going to be bringing in Dr. C, who's going to talk about much more the professional side of it, research. I am a researcher. I'm getting my PhD at the Rand Corporation, Public Policy, and been doing that for a while. I look at mental health in the community, I look at community mental health, I look at religion and all these other factors that go into stress and all these things. And what they all point to, and what our research is going to point to, is that a lot of research says, hey, we should do that. You know what they said last year? Hey, we should do that. You know what they said a decade before that? Hey, we should do that. You know what we said 15 years ago? Let's do that. So let's do that. Let's do the research. Let's do good notes. Let's be thorough, and let's do the best we can for the students, because it's not just for them. They're the proving ground to show that our resource is valuable and needed in our community moving forward. So,
That just reminded me, I skipped a big part, but it's something you will be getting a lot of training from your supervisors on. I know you've already gotten training from Lucerito when you started, Dr. Lucerito when you started. But it really is about the documentation. Remember I mentioned we have a lot of people who are counting on us to keep our promises, and the way we keep accountable to them, the only way that we can prove that we are in there doing the work that needs to be done is by your beautiful documentation that starts as small as, and it may not be significant, but it truly is, your weekly, monthly logs. How many of you know about weekly, monthly logs? Because if you don't, you will know about them. And you'll be hearing from Adriana, who is not here. He's out there manning the table with Omar. We put together, using your information on a weekly basis, those are used to report back to the schools, because we want them to know just how the students are doing in terms of their attendance, their progress towards their goals. We don't have to know of course, we will never share their session notes, but we do want to know if there's something they can do to support you all or the student, so as to do what they need to accomplish, what can be done for them so that they can meet their goals. So that means consultation, the word communication, I should have put consultation. You're going to learn how to consult in a school environment. Is so important. You say, but I'm just a student. No, you're not. You're it. Tap, you're it. You're the professional, growing to be a professional, that's what you're doing. You're learning to be a consultant, and we're here to support you. So any questions, please just say, I'll get back to you with that, and go and give your supervisor a call. And I'm looking over at, oh gosh, I love our supervisors. You guys, stand up if you're a supervisor and you're here today. A couple of them are not here, but please, Ed, Nahil, please stand up. Thank you so much, Nancy. And who's back there? Maria's back there. Everybody, come on, Maria. And I want to say thank you to our amazing, and Dr. C, our amazing supervisors. Thank you. They have such great communication with me, and so that I can just want to do more. I mean, I'm retired, but I came out of retirement to do this because I'm passionate about it. Okay? I want to do more, and I want so that you guys can do more. Okay? So please, thank you for allowing us to share that. Monthly, weekly logs, very important. That's where all that information goes to the schools, and then later on we get to share that with so many more people that Dr. C will be talking about. Okay? Thank you. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you. So next up we have Jaylene Mazarelos, who's worked for us with LCS, and she's going to talk about the data and what we do with it and how we're mining the information, and that's what's great about us using Tebra. We'll be able to mine all that information in hours for an institute. And I could just open an agency. Okay, let's have an agency that's going to provide mental services. But we decided to run an institute because we're training people, right? Training people for tomorrow. And we're also gathering data because most data, as you see on Latinos or people of color, is from Boston. I live here in Boston. Not the same Latinos, okay? It's like, oh, they're from the islands. That's a black person speaking Spanish. I hadn't experienced that. Well, I did. One guy not awesome. Okay, but that was actually happening when I came back. So, very important that we're gathering data because what do we have? Keywords that we have in the field? Evidence-based, evidence-based, right? There's research. Yeah, but the research is on Latinos in Miami. We don't speak like that, right? No hablamos así, right? We speak like this. Oh, as you said in English, hablamos así, okay? Not así, right? So it's different, right? And again, here, when I grew up here, when I grew up in Pacoima, it's like, oh, they're all Latinos, they're all Mexican. Now, Guatemalan, Salvadorian, Central American, even South American, right? We have a lot of Colombian, Peru, and all that stuff. Claudia's Peruvian. So being able to see that, things have expanded, things change, but they haven't gotten smaller. The immigrant population hasn't gotten smaller, even though some people want it to. It's not going to happen, right? Just like that's not going to happen, people. You realize that? Okay, so it's just, things are just going certain ways, right? So anyway, what we bring up is, why am I here? Dr. Martinez as well, right? So the story is this, it's like, this is a small world. It's amazing how small it is. Here I was, a senior at UC Riverside in 1980. And Dr. Martinez is teaching the advanced course, for neuropsychology, right? Because I think that was it. And so he's this young guy who just got his doctorate, now get a doctorate, and so here he is, and then later on I come back to California after being in Boston, Texas, and then Ventura, and coming back here, and I start working with him at an agency that he started with now. Okay, essentially when we start. I worked with him first, I worked with this guy for 16 years, and I worked with him for another 14, 15 years. Well, anyway, he's been a professor at at Pepperdine University, and he just retired. The other day I said he just graduated. He just retired from Pepperdine. And all those years of being a professor, now he's consulting with us, and now he gets to do research with us, and we don't have to ask permission from Pepperdine to do things, because it's our data, right? It's our end, and which is the end has grown from that when we began with 20 schools, 2 schools, 3 schools, 5 schools. Now we have 18 schools. That's a lot of population. Plus LCS, which is the community versus if we see the gathering data on those primarily adults. But we have quite a few children that we see there with them. They all get the same questions. They look at them all that data, right? So, without further ado, here's Dr. Martinez and Jaylene. And Jaylene has no reason to be nervous, but she's okay. But before we do that, there's various grounding techniques that are very important. So, instead of taking a break, how do we start grounding techniques? You have your feet shoulder width apart, and you're either standing or sitting. So if you feel like standing, go ahead, right? And one of the basic ones is, you little kids see it with Elmo, right? What does Elmo teach you? He teaches you to do the deep belly breath, right? Deep belly breath. Right. Breathe in slow and deep, and hold it. And exhale through your mouth, and here she goes. At least 3 times. It's good that also not having hands crossed or anything. Right, so we tense up when we're going. So that's one of the grounding exercises, right? That we use with every plant, right? Boy, I forgot, because they just started talking. Right. So, right, Dr. Martinez, if you were ready. Yes. And you.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. All right. I want to wake you up after we put you to sleep here. So. I'm Dr. Martinez, Tomas Martinez, and as Dr. Carpenter said, we are old friends from forever. And so I'm glad I'm still alive the way he was describing me. I have just retired, so I've been off work actually for about a month, and I'm not used to it, so it's kind of different. So I'm glad to be back, talking to real adults as opposed to my grandkids who I've been talking to and telling them to be quiet and get off the TV and all that stuff. But anyway, I'm a Latino psychologist, community clinical psychologist. I've been around forever, as Dr. Carpenter said. But I happen to have the pleasure of meeting him as he was my student. I was at the University of Michigan. I graduated. But I'm actually from Baldwin Park. You know what Baldwin Park is? Bowling Green, man. San Diego Valley. I'm a local boy. And so my whole dream was to come back and do work here in Los Angeles. But I didn't want to go to East LA because all the Chicanos were in East LA. So I went to the San Fernando Valley, and that's where Dr. Cardenas and I met again in that way. And I knew that he lived here and grew up here. And we had talked about the valley and how deficit it was with mental health. There was no mental health services for Latinos in the San Fernando Valley. Throughout the whole valley. You can imagine that. I helped create the first Spanish-speaking mental health center out of San Fernando Mental Health. And I helped develop and create El Centro de Amistad, which I'm very glad is still sustainable after 45 years. It's still alive. And living right across the street from the same city you're at. So Dr. Cardenas and I have this dream of creating, again, another nonprofit in the local community that would relevantly work with the local low-income poorest of the poor in the community of the San Fernando Valley. And so that was kind of what our dream was, to put this together. And so I thought he was going to retire, but I guess not. So it's a family business, and it's growing great, and I am so happy to see all of you here, all of you who are here to help the community, because that was what the whole dream was about: training, development, and practice. My interest right now is primarily in research, and so I wasn't a researcher originally, although I was trained at the University of Michigan to do research, and I did a lot of community research in the San Fernando Valley. I can tell you where all the drugs are sold, I can tell you where all the crimes are committed, and I can tell you where all the bodies are, including why people live where they do in the San Fernando Valley. So anything you need to know about the community, I'd be glad to talk to you about. At the same time, mental health to me has always been an interest, in regards to making it available to the entire population. My whole dream is to create a Latino mental health system of care. And so you are part of that, and you are part of that developmental model. Whether you stay here or go on to do other things, that's my hope for you. And so that's kind of my expectation, and I will do what I can to help you reach your goal in those contexts. But right now, I'm here for this research project that we're working on. So Jaylene is my student, as Dr. Cardenas was my student, many years ago, almost. But now she's doing this work with me. I have other students who are still working with me since I just left. But we are still working on this project. We just presented at the American Psych Association, and we are going to present at the National Latino Psychology Association in October, which I would encourage you to be a part of, a member of, because it's a very important, powerful advocacy group in the nation right now for mental health. So along those bases, we're looking at evidence-based research in the context of treatment and mental health for Latino mental health services. Right now, we've created kind of a pre and post intervention study that will look at your, the work that you're doing in regards to treatment efforts for our families and community and children. And Jaylene is here to help us learn more about what you want to do for this. At the same time, to me, even though it's research, I really think assessment is a communication tool. A way to communicate with our clients and our families about things that they have hard times talking about, that are really hard to express, to put into words. And by asking these questions, we open up the gates and we give permission for these families and children to kind of release a lot of the trauma that they carry with them. Trauma has been always one of those areas that I've been most interested in, especially with our families. We tend to carry it with us throughout our lifetime. And I've seen that in my own family, I've seen that in myself, I've also seen that in the children that we're working with today in the study and the research that we've already seen. So we will help you see why this is important. We're not just trying to collect data, we're not just asking you to do numbers, but we're really talking about analyzing our people in a way that we can see not only what's happened to them, but in a way what we can do, especially currently with the trauma that our families and children are experiencing, as you know. So to that extent, I would ask you to take it seriously, even though it's tedious, do all the questions and do all the dotting of the measures, and we will come back to you if you don't. But the fact is, we're collecting a large database that's never been done before on Latinos, especially around treatment. The other is a pre and post. We're looking at the before and after. So we're looking at what you do and how it works, and does it make a difference? And so our hope is that what you're doing will make a difference in helping children to alleviate their trauma. And the evidence will show that if we're doing what we think we're doing. But we don't know. It's never been done. So it's an interesting study, but it's very important for us and our community. And our hope is to not only present it, but to have it published and present it along with you in any way that you want to be a part of that. So I just wanted to introduce that, and I'll let Jimmy begin to talk about the measures. Introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you for the introduction, Dr. Martinez. Please turn on the slides.
What? You need to put up first. Oh, first. No, straight. First.
Okay, technical difficulties. Okay.
Oh, I should say, I haven't adopted Jaylene, so just so you know. Oh, you changed your name, oh, good.
Okay, good. Well, I'll just quickly
This one.
Yes. Yes, so hi, my name is Jaylene Mazariegos. I am currently an AMFT at Luminaria's Counseling Services. I've actually been with Luminaria's for, I think since like late 2019. I started doing all of my practicum hours there, got my associates, and I've actually recently finished my 3,000 hours. It's been a journey, but I did split my time with Luminarias and at a private practice, so just trying to, get as much work done and give back to the community. So, in addition to that, I also am the research project manager that we're currently working with Dr. Martinez It's a collaborative project with Pepperdine and Luminarias. We have presented several, and we want to continue presenting, and how Dr. Martinez said, hopefully publishing. But the purpose of this presentation is to go just a little bit more in depth with the assessments that we do here at Luminarias, and to hopefully to help with case conceptualization, treatment planning, interventions, and all of that. Yeah, just a quick table of contents. So why do we use assessments? So how Dr. Martinez quickly mentioned, it does help give language to the clients. It helps identify problems that the client might be bringing in to the session. It can also help plan interventions, of course, treatment planning, and possible diagnosis. Now, there are several types of assessments. We do have standardized and non-standardized assessments. The 5 that I will be talking about are standardized because they have been created by researchers, studied, and validated. And they do provide a more concrete answer. The ones that we use, it's usually 0, 1, or 0, 1, 2, 3, or 0, 1, 3, and 5. There's also the non-standardized, which is more like the non-formal-ish kind of assessments, kind of, tell me a little bit more about your family mental health history. What can you tell me about your social support system? That is still assessing the client's system and what they are bringing in. But like I said, it's just not as concrete or formal. And the assessments that we do use, there's, again, 5, but 3 of them are progress measures, so they can be used ongoing, meaning that it's not just at the beginning of intake and that's it. No, you can revisit them, kind of measure what the client is, and also see, like, is there something that came up during treatment? Because that can happen, it's life. Or, has things been addressed and the reduction of symptoms has happened? So that's why I put in, it can be used at the start of client intake, it also ends at discharge. So the first one is the GAD-7, meaning the Generalized Anxiety Disorder, 7 questions. It was derived from the diagnostic criteria of the DSM for generalized anxiety. No, it is for generalized anxiety. If you're assessing for social anxiety, it has to be a little bit more different. And it is not solely a screening tool, meaning that, let's say they scored very high. They have generalized anxiety. No. It gives you a good route to take, but assess further to give the diagnosis. It's a very helpful tool. And scoring, yes, like 0 to 4 is none to minimal, 5 to 9 is mild, 10 to 14 is moderate, and 15 to 21 is severe. Please pay attention when they are scoring moderate or severe. There might be a lot more beneath that. The PHQ-9, the Patient Health Questionnaire, is derived from major depressive disorder from the DSM, very similar to the GAD-7. It is, again, a screening tool. I did want to point out number 9, which is the thoughts that you would be better off dead or hurting yourself in some way. If they score a 1, 2, or 3, go ahead and do a suicide risk assessment. So anything more than 0, suicide risk assessment. Because who knows what they might be going through, how severe it might be, and we just want to cover all our bases and proceed with safety planning if need be. Again, monitoring the progress of the symptoms that the client is bringing in. The big one, the ACEs. Now, I'm going off the assumption that everyone here has done the training on ACEs, but I'll just go a little bit more in depth with it. So the ACEs was created by the CDC in partnership with Kaiser Permanente to assess what trauma or adversity in childhood could affect a person's psychological and or biological health. It is 10 questions, and they do address abuse, family discord, neglect, and other possible adversities that a person can experience. Note, the ACEs covers the first 18 years of life. Most of this will be given to adults, so when you are going through them with your clients, please make sure that you are addressing that it is for the first 18 years, not something that happened recently. Let's just say the client's like 30. Also, this is not a complete list of adverse or traumatic experiences that a client could have. So again, you can go through these, but then go further, because the client might not know what to say. So your guiding questions will be extremely helpful. I also did want to point out the statistics that 64% of US adults score more than 1 on the ACEs, and 17.5 score 4 or higher. Now, what could the ACEs mean? Well, I mentioned the psychological and biological health concerns. That could mean stroke, chronic heart disease, asthma, chronic depression, PTSD, etc. And also, this is something very important. The questions here can be a bit uncomfortable, especially a few that are going into possible sexual abuse. Now, it is our job to make the space safe, comfortable, contained. We should not be afraid to ask these questions. This is therapy. It's going to be uncomfortable. But it is helping us give a more trauma-informed care for the clients. We want to address these issues because they may or may not be ready to address them, but we will get there with them. We want to recognize the trauma and adversity that they might have experienced. We want to provide the knowledge of how this trauma or traumatic events, adversity could affect them, and inform them and implement techniques, coping skills, so that they can advance and go from survivor to thriver. Now, the ACEs will be given to adults. I'll go back to the first 18 years of their life. Now, for children, you will be administering the pearls. Now, the pearls is derived from the ACEs. It was created by the UC San Francisco team. It's divided into 2 parts. The first 10, very, very similar to the ACEs. There's just an additional 7 questions that is geared more towards possible housing insecurity, food insecurity, parent, caregiver, serious illness, or death. But it is going back to assessing for possible adversity and the effects that it might have had or is currently having on the child. The pearls can be given to children from 0 to 19, but it is up to your discretion for the 18 and 19-year-olds, up to your discretion to use the ACEs or the pearls. Probably talk to your supervisor about that. But another important part on why we administer the ACEs and the pearls, because we're trying to see if there's potential toxic stress, taking that from the training. There's the positive stress, tolerable stress, toxic stress. The positive one could be, you know, that rush of adrenaline, that cortisol release that we experience when we're about to do a presentation, or when before a game if you're a child. Tolerable stress can happen when, let's say, for example, a person's in a car crash. It is very stressful. It can be traumatic. But if that client, or child, or adult has had the adequate social support, or the tools, or the space to process what they experience, they go up, but then they go down. Toxic stress is when there's an accumulation of constant experiences of adversity or trauma. They lack the resources, they lack the support, and that is where the biological and psychological effects could happen, such as the examples I gave of heart attack, stroke, chronic heart disease, chronic depression, and PTSD. Now, there are several versions of the pearls that you might see on Cario. So there's the child parent giver form, teen parent giver, and teen self-report. Now, for the teens, could be up to your discretion or talk to your supervisor about that. But please be aware that there are different versions of it and administer them adequately. The CRIES 8. So this was actually the beginning of the research project that we brought up in the beginning. The CRIES 8 is a Child Revised Impact of Event Scale. It was derived from like a much bigger, longer, more adult impact of event scale assessment. Now researchers, it was over like in Europe, developed the CRIES 8 actually to administer them to children in refugee camps after natural disasters or war. But we have taken it and we have done the study, we have shown the reliability and the validity of administering it to our population here in LA, or just you can say an urban city setting. Now the CRIES 8, goes into trauma symptoms you might see. It is derived from the diagnostic criteria of PTSD. Now PTSD, if you look at DSM, has like 4 subscales, if you will. The CRIES 8 addresses 2 of them. The 4 being hyperarousal, avoidance, intrusion, and alterations, negative alterations of cognition and mood. The CRIES 8 addresses avoidance and intrusion. And while I did want to make a note, while it is called Child Revised Impact of Event Scale, it can be administered, and it should be administered to all adult clients. It's just called the Child Revised Impact of Event Scale because it can be administered for children 8 and above. They just made it a little bit more child-friendly in the language. Oh, and please take note, the previous ones were more like 0, 1, 2, 3. This is 0, 1, 3, 5. Please make note of that when you are assessing it. Before I forget, maybe Dr. Susan may have gone. When you are administering this, it is revolving around one event in their life. Could be recent, could be several years in their past, but it had a very, very strong impact on them. It is your duty to ask what that event was. Because they can be answering this, and then when we go back to it, we'll be like, okay, cool, like what does it mean? What is it referring to? So after you administer them, ask the client, what event were they referring to? It could be something that came up in the ACEs or the pearls, or it could be something completely different. What you can also do if you are administering these assessments with the client in person is ask them, okay, based on what you scored here or what you answered on the ACEs or pearls, which one is more prominent? Which one had the significant impact on you? And refer it when you're answering these questions. Up to your discretion. Now, I mentioned that the CRISE is divided in the avoidance and intrusion subscales. Here you can see them more, so they're not linear, they're kind of mixed in. But it is important to see, okay, where are they scoring higher? Are they scoring higher in intrusion symptoms, meaning like intrusive thoughts, memories, flashbacks, nightmares? Or are they scoring higher in avoidance? You just don't want to talk about it, you don't want to address it. They avoid it, they distract themselves to the maximum level, so they don't have to think about it. But as we're training, we're seeing the effects of how avoiding it can lead to even higher symptomologies, higher anxieties, higher depressive scores. But important to see that. Now, how can we use these assessments for case conceptualization, or how I said treatment planning? Well, let's say like when your client comes in, they are experiencing, they're experiencing bullying. And that leads to maybe a bit of self-harm or suicide ideation. Now, I mentioned those because I put here personal, interpersonal, and community. Now, what does this mean? Personal traumas could be seen as self-harming, suicidation, or even homicide ideation. Interpersonal, family, friends, could be bullying at school, could be abuse happening at home, could be domestic violence, yes, family discord, community violence. Maybe you live in a very high crime rate neighborhood. That could have an impact on them as well. Discrimination, racism, immigration issues. Those can be viewed as community. And I put them all together because they can influence one another. Going back to the example of the client experiencing bullying, that's interpersonal, which leads to personal symptoms such as self-harm. Now your client comes in and they're addressing all these issues, or you ask them and they tell you about it. Okay, you wrote that all down, you make note of it, and you administer the assessments. Now the ACEs and pearls can help identify the personal, interpersonal, and community, but now it's up to us to see what are maybe specific symptoms. That is where the progress measures come in, the GAD-7, PHQ-9, and the CRISE-8. Now, we are addressing possible symptoms seen in anxiety, seen in depression, and seen in PTSD. Now we have a plethora of information to see, okay, where do we want to go with this client? What interventions should we implement to address these issues, these symptoms? How maybe frequent do these symptoms come up? Like, let's say, excessive worry seen in the GAD-7, they scored a 3. That's most days. Okay. So let's say they're experiencing 7 days a week. We want to reduce it to 4 days a week. What interventions can we implement to get the client there in, let's say, a month? I'm applying SMART goals. Can you see? So that is how these assessments can help with your treatment planning, help address issues with clients in the space. And again, it might be uncomfortable. That's therapy. And if we are avoiding bringing up these issues with the client, then we're doing them an injustice. We're not doing our job. Now, a little bit of like just the research, going into a little bit more in depth of what Dr. Martinez mentioned in the beginning. So what the team did is we are gathering data from these assessments. Well, initially it was the ACEs, GAD-7, PHQ-9, and the CRISE-8, because we wanted to validate and we wanted to find the reliability of the prize aid with our population. Because I said, the prize aid was given to refugee camps after natural disasters. I think the examples were like tsunamis and like major earthquakes and war. But obviously we're not dealing with war or natural disasters, huge natural disasters. But still, that doesn't mean that our clients, or for most of you, our kids are not experiencing those symptoms seen as like those kids over in like Europe. But through data analysis of all the information, all the data gathered for the assessments, we have found that the prize aid is very reliable and it is valid with our population. But did want to point out, interesting thing found was that in the intrusion subscale was shown higher in adults than our minors. Because I forgot to mention, the research does gather from all ages. The youngest one that we have right now, I believe, is like 6. Yeah, it's like 6. And the oldest was like 64. So we just separated them as minors, 18 under, and adults, 18 plus. But going back to the point where intrusion was shown to be higher in adults than in minors, but avoidance was seen very similar. And that was something very interesting to us and something that can be addressed in session. And also, what we found was higher anxiety and higher depression scores, higher GAD-7, PHQ-9, higher CRIES-8. So there is a correlation in anxiety, depression, and PTSD seen with our population. And then, just want to put that up so you can see that we are presenting, we are going to conferences. We have presented at APA. We just did a couple weeks ago, right? Yeah, beginning actually of this month, we presented at APA. We have presented at WPA, which is the Western Psychological Association, and then upcoming in October, yeah. In October, we're presenting at LP and LPA, the National Latinx Psychological Association in Chicago. So super excited for that, and we'll see where we go with this project. Now that we're having the pearls, it's something new. it's something new, but we can implement the pearls and see where this project goes, and all the work that is being done here at Luminarias. Because all the data you're gathering, or the assessments that you guys are doing, is data for us, so we can continue advancing this. We do have quite a number of participants right now. I think we're close to 200. It's like 184. They want to go higher. Why? Because more data equals more solid data analysis. And yeah, we also kind of want to get more adults, but we are school-based, so there is like a discrepancy with like the number of children, both minors and adults, but we'll get there. And I guess that will be it. Are there any questions that you might have regarding the assessment or anything that I said? I know I just threw a lot at you.
Is there some place that spells out how to upload the assessments in Tibra? I know I just went over it with Eddie, but it would be nice to have it written down somewhere.
That would be more towards like Lucerito.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not too sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be a question.
What was the question?
Of how to upload or find the assessments and actually do them in Tibra. I'm used to the old way. So
I can, if you email me, I can send you a link to a workshop, and then I can show you how to do that more hands-on.
okay, perfect,
Yeah.
thanks.
It's just a little more technical, but it's once you get the hang of it, I think it's kind of simple.
Okay, thanks.
Will you make that available for everybody, you say?
Yes, the workshops are available for everybody. However, I first made them available to the incoming trainees because The trainees that were on here were with us for the transition into Tebra back in May. I had already offered workshops for them then. If you're interested and you've been with us through the transition and you're interested in participating in the workshops, you can feel free to email me and I'll gladly send you the link. I was just prioritizing a lot of the incoming trainees since they don't have any hands-on experience with it.
Question?
You have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. So the cries, we can also do them on children? We don't just have to do them on,
The cries.
adults? The cries 8 or the, right?
Yeah, the cries. Are they for children as well? Yes.
Yeah, here for all
The
ages.
cry, no, I'm saying the cries 8,
Yeah, the cries,
yeah.
the same thing.
The same thing? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you should be giving them to any client. All clients.
All kinds, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you give it, even though they've said 0 on the ACEs, do you still want us to give it?
Yes, that's why I said refer to what is like, I think it's like it.
Okay.
What is it? It doesn't have to be, I just said that could be something you can do.
Okay,
But it's up to the client. Maybe it could be something completely different, not addressed in the ACEs or PROs.
okay. I was just asking because when I was originally trained, I was told only to do it after, if they scored 1 or higher on ACEs, so.
Possible.
No.
Everybody gets everything.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Everybody gets cries, period.
Thank you.
Yeah, all clients should be given 4 assessments. I say 4 because it's either depending on ACEs or PROs.
Yeah.
But they should be given the GAD-7, PHQ-9, and the CRIS 8.
Got it.
Mhm.
Yes,
What if we have a client that has a hard time maybe identifying a perceived traumatic event and then they don't know what to pinpoint in order to answer the CRIS 8 questions?
Sorry, can you
Like,
give an example?
So maybe they have a score of 0 on the ACEs, but then we ask, well, think about something that happened that may have been traumatic or that really impacted you, and then they can't identify any kind of event, so therefore they wouldn't be able to think of an event to be able to answer the CRIS 8 questions. How do we go about that? Because I have had clients who are like, well, I'm here because my parents think I should be here, and I don't know what this is about.
okay, basically, we have clients that, we got what the referral says, right? And then, that's why it's important to speak to the parents, because the parents like, oh, well, did they tell you this, or they tell you this? And it's like, we asked that on the ACEs, like, let's say, we've had a lot of them, they lost their uncle, they lost their grandpa, right, with COVID or something. And they're like, kids like, they answered 0, right? They didn't say that they had a loss. So then we go back and say, well, I spoke to your mother, or I spoke to your grandma, or whatever, and apparently this happened. And they're like, oh, because that's a part of therapy is about, even the person that come voluntarily to therapy, there is still a duality. Do I want to be here? Do I not want to be? Do I want to be? I know what I need to deal with. I need to deal with this, and I'm not going to talk about this. Why? Because I decided when it happened, I was never going to talk about it, right? And I'm going to talk about this. And that's the danger that, well, we have high enough scores on the PHQ-9 and the GAD. We have something for anxiety. We have something for depression. Oh, we don't need to have anything over here. But that's what we see, and that's what the data is showing us with ACEs, that there's these chronic issues that they've never dealt with, and the medical personnel, because who came up with ACEs? A medical doctor with Kaiser. And here's that person, and when they tell us about this, their scores go down on these high blood pressure, on these other issues, right? And they're not even us. So basically, as she's saying, it's an ongoing thing. It's like, well, I need to develop a relationship with Johnny, Frankie, Francisca, whatever. It's like, I'm gonna come back to this. You know what, now that, I've noticed this, or I'm gonna ask you this again. I'm gonna give you this question. They don't know that we don't do this. They don't know anything. It's like, I'm gonna ask you this again. I was told by my supervisor to give this to you again. right? And they're like, oh, okay. And so sometimes what happens is they betray themselves and like, oh no, well, now I'm not pretending like I didn't hear that, right?
Dr. Carlos, we have a comment.
Yeah, I was just gonna say super quick, like, that you're also gonna bring up the things that we should be aware of, because these are all self-reported.
Mhm.
So, building that rapport could probably help bring up some stuff.
I want to ask a question.
Oh, yeah.
So would it be okay for initially on the cries to say if that client denies any event and then re-administer it maybe a month or two later?
Yeah.
And then mark like 0 for.
Yeah, that's why I said, like, because they are self-report, I mean, they're asking the first or second session, they might not be fully comfortable with you, so they're not going to review as much. So as time goes on and rapport is building much stronger, they could review a lot more. Or again, life happens and.
Now, one thing I would add is that we're trying to be creative with getting the idea of what kind of traumas our families have. So in a sense, even though these are races and all that, there are certain traumas like immigration that aren't on any of these questionnaires. So we really have to be sensitive to that idea that yes, if they say no, and then we come back and go, well, wait a minute, what about this one? Then we add it, and we ask, and then we include that, and that may be a new list that we create of traumas in our families. So that is helpful data for us to know what was the incident that they're talking about specifically. Even if it's minor, even if it's not a big deal for us, but for them, it's the biggest deal in the world.
And that's why I mentioned the non-standardized assessments. That is when you are doing like a interview with the client in the beginning, kind of getting more information.
It actually happened with 2 of my clients that they initially denied abuse, or in one case it was molestation. Initially denied it because he didn't want to get his family in trouble. And then it came out later. Do you have any pointers on bringing that out sooner?
That's a good question.
Do you already know that it occurred, or you didn't know it occurred?
No, I didn't know that it occurred until I had built rapport with these 2 clients. And then they asked a lot of questions about the mandated reporting process because they didn't want to get their families in trouble. So they, I had to reassure them that, nothing bad was going to happen if they told me. But that could feel like a lie if something bad does happen and, their home life gets disrupted. So.
Well, I don't think that's uncommon, and at the same time, I do think that's also part of when it is coming up, we need to address it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, recognize that that's part of the message of what we call the intrusion avoidance, right?
Right.
So the message of avoidance is don't talk about it, it didn't happen, and all that. So that's what we're identifying through these little words of intrusion and avoidance. But they're words, and your notes tell us what that is that they're avoiding and what it is that's intruding. So I think that's important, and it's something that we're finding with the adults, for example, who carry this trauma onto adulthood, where we get it to children, they may not. So that's important for us to challenge it early on. And I would say have the courage to address that when it does come up. Don't avoid it as well.
Right.
And you can bring them back up if you have now formed a very strong rapport with the clients. Bring back the aces or the pearls.
Yeah.
And see, like, okay, since you have mentioned this, like, can we go through this again? It doesn't just have to be at the very beginning of intake. I did say the aces and the pearls are like progress measures, but that doesn't mean you cannot bring it back up to maybe like identify potential adversity or trauma.
We also are looking at change effects over time. So it's a question of how long does it take for this stuff to actually come out? And as we know, it may take longer in some families than in others. So it really is important that we're kind of monitoring the assessment ongoing. So we're trying to use those measures to know that you're using.
Question? You have your hand up here?
Oh, no, I think Dr. Martinez already answered my question. I just wanted to know if it would be better to administer these tests after we build rapport, so, they're able to be more open about it. But, like, again, you said that they monitor the progress
Right.
and
Yeah, it's okay to use it more than once and multiple times. That's okay.
Exactly.
That's the idea.
So
of
you
using
answered
it
my question.
as a communication.
Right.
Yeah, I wanted to comment, Joyce had a great point, from the clinical aspect of the promise of nothing bad is gonna happen when you make a child abuse report. And so, I'm sorry to take a moment, but it's important to bring this up, is that, you don't know what could happen with these, if the Department of Human Services does their investigation, whether or not there's more stuff that happens in their internal investigations, like that would be said by many years. And all you can do is to talk to the client and remind them what they're sharing and the fact that they're trusting you to bring this trauma out, that's something that's a privilege that they're giving. And you're gonna be there every step of the way to support them, at least while they're in treatment. But they also need to look at their informal support, who can be their support when you're not there. Because some things could happen that we don't know. So that's all.
You have a question?
Well, just one more quick comment. I think with trauma, the likelihood of people coming forward immediately when that happens is very low sometimes because the traumatic event happens and that's the characteristic of the trauma that we sort of have done on the back, going around in the back of your mind. So the inconsistencies in the data would be also kind of red flags, or there could be something further to explore, right? But anyway, separately, I know your slide had a statistic about something like 64% of adults in the U.S. I mean, they marked one item, I think, on the cases. But I was just curious if you had any insight about worldwide statistics or in Latin America. How does U.S. compare to other countries in CPR?
That's a good question, and I'm gonna be honest, I actually don't know. Yeah,
Maybe just.
I don't know off the top of my head, but we have looked at those comparisons, and so in that context, but I'm not sure, I don't know the answer to that at this point, but I know that we have looked at it.
This is difficult because like, mental health is like first world, like issue kind of like my family in Mexico. And I'm like, so how's there through there? They're like, dude, that's like a United States problem. We got bigger problems in Mexico, worrying about that. So like having that ACEs thing, I can see how it's difficult having that report, having that stats, just because in Europe, maybe the United States, Canada, when it comes to Mexico, Salvador, a lot more like the issues of the worry about their food versus,
Well, and that's the controversy of the ACEs as well, because it does get at specific issues of abuse and such in that way, but it doesn't necessarily address some of the traumas that people come from different parts of the world. The reason I found this trauma measure was because it was really dealing with the issues of violence and kind of social upheaval that I think our families, especially when I think about the newest immigrants coming in, right? All the folks that are coming in now. And so it's similar to that idea of being war torn, even though it's not a war, it is a war. And so for me, that's kind of the dramatic aspect of what we're looking at. But we don't really understand what it's done to our families at this point because there's no dignity. Nobody's really looked at it. So that's kind of why it's important to kind of filter out. And if you guys have ideas on how we're working and what we're doing, that's part of the Dr. Cardenas and I talked about, the treatment model that really deals with specific trauma-based issues in Latino families. And that's something we're exploring now, but we don't have an answer to, it says, because we really don't know how much trauma there is in that idea. But I think there's a lot more that we understand, because people are hiding it.
And that's why I said that the assessments can also give language to the client of what they have been experiencing. Like you mentioned Latin America, you have a client come in like, oh, tengo muchos nervios.
Yeah.
Okay, administer the GAD-7, which can go more in depth of what those nervios are. So.
The other thing we haven't talked about at all, I haven't talked about, is transgenerational trauma. We're talking about the trauma passed on from our families, second and third generation, guys, okay? And so it's kind of invisible. They may not know that they're traumatized because they've lived that life as the whole family has. And now as they're getting through it, oh wow, now I know that experience. Because I'm a third generation, and I've looked at that problem in my first and second generation. And it's all there, we just don't talk about it.
Would it be appropriate to do the crimes, if there's more than one trauma that if the client had intrusions and avoidance about? Like, just we had a client who had, physical abuse, but then also, parents, domestic violence and, substance use. So they had intrusions about more than one, event. So, yeah.
The crime measure wasn't designed for specific events, but I think in regards to using it for different events, it would be interesting to see if there are different responses to that crime measure under different traumas. So some traumas are more severe than others. So I would say to do it and see if we see that difference. But it'd be interesting to see if there really is a difference. So generically, it's going to look at overall trauma, not necessarily one particular event, although most of these people would experience a very traumatic event, like war, earthquakes.
That's why you take note of what that event was, because the crime state doesn't have somewhere to put in. Yeah, it's kind of generic, like, oh, do you try to remove it from your memory? Do you try not to talk about it? So that's why I said, like, take note of what that event was, what that it was. What do we want to talk about?
Where would you like us to document that? Would you like us to, I mean, not you personally, but whomever can answer this, how can we go about documenting that? Do you want us to document it on, you know, our notes that we have to take after our sessions, like, just so we keep track?
You're jumping ahead, and that is exactly what we're going to get to. The giving questionnaires is not to just gather data. We wouldn't be doing this if it was just to help Dr. Martinez's public, right? And that's the honest truth. It's like there needs to be a benefit to the client, right? Otherwise, no, we're not. That's where you get historically, you know, it's like research that's on the white rat. What is that? The college student, you know, who just happen to come in and fill out stuff, and we have data, right? We have publishable material, as opposed to we're talking about clients that are being seen, are being evaluated, are being in treatment, and the goal is to improve, right? Increase, reduce, eliminate, right? So that's why it makes no sense unless we say, what are you talking about? Just like the thing on that, what the heck does that mean, right? Or in English, it's like, the client, like, I really get bothered when I see client was upset. I have no idea what you mean, right? That's upsetting. Crying? Sad? Angry? Enraged? What does upset mean, right? So that's why there's certain terminology we need to become comfortable with, or less uncomfortable with, and just certain questions we need to become less uncomfortable with and more comfortable with in asking, right? So that's all I'm saying. And what they're basically talking about is there's very, very few clients that only have one trauma, okay? There's multiple types of trauma, and the crisis is going to say, have you been? Okay, now let's tease out. That's what they call compounded trauma, right? It's compounded. And like Dr. Garcia said, it's multi-generation. There's what happened 2 or 3 generations ago, and then there's what's happened now with me, right? And so we're not saying, oh, well, we'll only deal with one. We deal with all of them, and that's the difficulty, that how do we prioritize, right, what's immediately necessary, and say, but we're not going to forget that these other issues must be, or we are going to deal with them. And like one thing you said, it's like, the client, you know, things can be taken too far. The client, people say, oh, the client has all the answers, the client knows what they need, the client, you know, et cetera. It's like, no, the client doesn't know what they need, they know what they want, just like teenagers or really little kids know what they want. Do they need those shoes? Do they need that toy? Do they need that cell phone? We need a cell phone if they're 6. But they say they do, right? So all those issues in terms of there's a multitude, and it's not just one, it's not, and that's where we have and that's where you all are here, you're coming from the classroom, and now you go into the real life, where it's complicated, it's messy, it's uncomfortable, right? And it doesn't fit the theory that somebody, and especially if they're theoreticians, right, that haven't been practiced. That's why I get my CEUs as much as possible for people who are therapists, not just research. You do research, but you also do therapy. They're involved with the real life, right, of how it works, right? And so you have the books, right? What do the books say? Whatever it is, theory and practice. Now we can you? And so we're not going to wait. We don't want to wait, and they're likely to have multiple traumas. To the point, okay?
Yeah, you can use assessments as a good guiding tool as well. Okay, let's expand more on that. Let's expand more on, what pictures pop into your head. So that's adding more practice based on the answers that you get from these assessments.